The air in the Clear Creek Valley apartment was thick and still, the dry July heat of pressing in like a physical weight. Detective Mark Reilly felt a bead of sweat trace a path down his temple, but he didn't wipe it away. His attention was fixed on the body. Ethan Hayes, a mid-level executive for a successful construction firm, was slumped in his expensive leather armchair. His eyes, wide and colorless, stared at a television screen that played a silent, looping advertisement for luxury condos. His skin was pale and puckered, his lips tinged with blue. The coroner had already given a preliminary assessment, one that made the hairs on Reilly's arms stand on end despite the heat. The cause of death was drowning. Yet, there wasn't a drop of water in the room. The carpets were bone dry. There was no overturned glass, no sign of a struggle. The windows were sealed, the air conditioning humming its monotonous tune. Ethan Hayes had drowned in his own living room, 20 floors above the ground, in the middle of a city gasping under a summer heat wave. "Anything?" Reilly asked his partner, Detective Evans, a younger, more eager officer who was currently examining the victim's desk. Evans shook his head, pushing his glasses up his nose. "No note, no signs of forced entry. His financials look stable. Neighbors didn't hear a thing. It's like he just sat down and breathed in water that wasn't there." Reilly knelt, his gaze sweeping the area around the chair. That's when he saw it. Tucked just beside the chair's leg, almost hidden in the deep pile carpet, was a small object. He carefully picked it up with a gloved hand. It was a fish, no bigger than his thumb, carved from a dark, water-stained piece of wood. The craftsmanship was simple, but elegant, its tiny scales meticulously etched, its form sinuous and lifelike. "This is the third one," Reilly murmured. Evans looked over. "The third drowning, sir? The other two were—" "Different circumstances. Same impossible result," Reilly interrupted. Back at the station, the incident board was a chaotic map of Reilly's frustration. Photos of the 3 victims stared blankly back at him. Ethan Hayes, Sarah Jenkins, David Chen. What connected them? They lived in different parts of the valley, had different jobs, different lives. The only common thread was the impossible way they died and the strange totem left behind. He focused on the fish. He'd sent the first 2 to forensics. The wood was identified as a specific type of cottonwood that was now exceedingly rare in the region. It used to grow abundantly around one place, the old reservoir. The old reservoir was a ghost, drained and filled 30 years ago to make way for the very Pinnacle Estates development that Ethan Hayes' company had championed. What was once a sprawling body of water, a vital part of the local ecosystem, was now a grid of concrete, glass, and manicured lawns, a monument to progress. That night, Reilly couldn't sleep. He sat in his sterile apartment, the case files spread across his floor. He kept the small wooden fish from the Hayes crime scene on his table, sealed in an evidence bag. As the city outside hummed, a different sound began to prickle at the edge of his hearing. He froze. The sound was faint but clear, like a leaky faucet. He checked the kitchen sink. Dry. The bathroom. Dry. He stood in the center of his living room, straining to locate the source, but the sound was everywhere and nowhere at once. It was inside his head. He squeezed his eyes shut. The memory of his last big case, the one that had gotten him transferred, surfacing like a nightmare. A child's face, pale and still, a mistake he could never unmake. He snapped his eyes open. For a fleeting second, in the reflection of his darkened window, he saw a figure standing behind him. It was tall and gaunt, its form indistinct, shimmering, as if seen through a curtain of water. Its hair was long and dark, plastered to its skin. Before he could turn, it was gone. His own reflection stared back, wide-eyed and terrified. The next day, driven by a gnawing unease he refused to name, Reilly drove to the old reservoir site. It was now a sterile business park. He found a local library nearby and spent hours digging through archived newspapers and county records. He discovered that the draining of the reservoir had been contentious. Protesters had chained themselves to bulldozers. Local Ute tribe elders had warned of angering the land's spirits. A small ranching community had been forcibly relocated, its residents compensated but scattered. He compiled a list of the most vocal opponents and the key figures who pushed the development through. And then he found the connection. The grandparents of all three victims, Ethan Hayes, Sarah Jenkins, and David Chen, had been on the county commission that gave the final, decisive vote to drain the reservoir. A cold dread, slick and heavy, settled in Reilly's stomach. This wasn't random. It was revenge. His investigation led him to one of the displaced ranchers, an old man named Silas, who now lived in a small, cluttered house on the outskirts of the city. Silas was a woodcarver. When Reilly showed him the evidence bag, the old man's eyes, cloudy with age, sharpened with a deep, ancient sorrow. "The river's tears," Silas whispered. "We used to carve them as offerings, to appease the spirit of the silverwood. We promised it a home, and then they took it away." "Who is we?" Reilly asked. "Who is carving these now?" "The promise was broken," the old man said. "A debt must be paid. The spirit doesn't forget. It was born of sorrow, of a pioneer woman who drowned herself in the reservoir when her child was lost to a fever. It watched over the valley. In return, we promised it our reverence. When they drained its home, they didn't just kill a lake. They desecrated a grave." Reilly felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "That's a legend, a ghost story." "Is it?" Silas asked. "Tell me, detective, do you ever hear water when there is none? Do you see things in the corner of your eye? It is looking for a new home, a new vessel. It will fill you up until there is no room left for air." Leaving the old man's house, Reilly felt a growing panic. He was a man of logic, of evidence and facts, but the dripping sound was back, louder now, a constant, maddening rhythm in his ears. That night, he dreamt he was at the bottom of the old reservoir. The water was black and crushing. He couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. The gaunt, shimmering figure drifted towards him, its face a mask of endless grief, its hand outstretched. He woke up gasping, his heart hammering against his ribs, the sheets soaked in sweat. He knew he was next. His grandfather. He'd been the chief engineer on the draining project. A storm broke that evening, a furious thunderstorm that lashed against the city. Reilly was in his office, frantically trying to find a rational explanation, when the lights flickered and died. The emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows down the hallway. The dripping sound was deafening now, seeming to come from the very walls. His phone rang, the screen illuminating a blocked number. He answered. "Who is this?" he yelled. The sound of water intensified, and then a whisper echoed through the line. promise is a promise. The line went dead. Riley looked up. Water was seeping from under the door of his office. Not a trickle, but a steady, silent flow. It was impossible. He was on the third floor. He scrambled back, his chair tipping over. The water was unnaturally cold, pooling around his ankles. He watched in horror as the level rose with terrifying speed. It was at his knees, then his waist. The office furniture began to float. The case files, the photos of the victims, all swirled in the dark, rising water. He was trapped. The door wouldn't budge, the pressure of the water too great. The window was sealed. He was in a glass box, filling with water from an impossible source. He pounded on the glass, his screams swallowed by the storm and the sound of the phantom flood. Through the churning water, he saw it, the spirit of the Silverwood. It stood on the other side of his desk, its form clearer now. It was a woman, her face contorted in a rictus of sorrow and rage, her eyes black pits of despair. She raised a hand, and in her palm was a small, dark object, a wooden fish. As the water closed over his head, his lungs burning, the last thing Detective Mark Reilly saw was the spirit's face, its silent scream a mirror of his own, finally claiming the debt that had been owed for 30 long, dry years.